The first question is, how should we go forward?
Okay, I choose 3 themes, which I think that are discussable. The first one is, let's say, the theme about the most popular books on the childhood, but not these legendary books on the childhood. The new edition made by Colin Haywood, made by Cunningham, which was presented on one paper today, and the third one is published in the year 2010 by some American publishing house. They follow this structure of the history of the woman in the West. That means that they divided the history of the childhood into the different and several periods, and they wanted for each period the most prominent historians to write about the different aspects of their life of the children. The title is also the history of the childhood. You probably, the editor, I should Google it. Yeah, Paula Fasse. But
she's Paula Fasse. She's a professor at Berkeley.
Yeah, and I think it's also the Berkeley.
Can you spell the name?
Paula.
So Fasse. Fasse is a German word.
Yeah. Connected with pleasure.
Hopefully with wine. Yeah.
Transfer of books in Protestant.
So there is no obligation to know all the books, but I think that you know some of the authors and some general remarks on this work. It's good to be a little bit more insightfully presented, let's say so. Because actually the sociologist who presented this work, I think there was too much acceptance to this paper. So perhaps a little bit discussion about all these attitudes to the history of the childhood.
Comment something or Maria?
I don't have the books fresh in my mind. The book by Fasse, I don't really know what has book. I've just met Paula Fasse, and she's very energetic, and she is a member of the Society for the History of Childhood and Youth.
Mm-hmm. Was they also published a journal?
A newsletter and a journal which was launched in 2007-8, a Journal of Childhood and Youth. It was in the first one by historians of the history of childhood and youth, not of childhood and youth. Journal for the History of Childhood and Youth. And but I don't know how far. What I would say is that Cunningham and Haywood, and I assume Paul Fasse as well, they forcibly concentrate on British, French example. Maybe the Germans come into the whole picture. I don't know. Is it the same with the book by Fasse, this encyclopedia?
Yeah.
So this is not okay. This doesn't mean that they are generally worth of reading and full of ideas. But just as a remark, they forcibly concentrate on Britain, France, U.S., Germany, yes, and sometimes Italy comes a little, and that's it. But they are rich books. I think Cunningham is a very talented writer. I would say he's writing very nicely. His book is a view from above, what people thought about children, a perception of childhood, and less the experiences of children themselves. As far as I can remember, Haywood concentrates also on parent-child relations. They are books that cover a long-term period, and this is certainly strong. Yes, but they are the best books that we have, I think, as far as total history of childhood is concerned.
Okay, one question about the periodization. As well Cunningham as well Haywood, they're starting with the early modern period. Also the cover of the book is the Bruegel's picture about the playing of the children. What do you think about that? Do you see some sort of the going on the road which market the earlier actually?
You have asked a very good question, because I could suppose that we have several different histories of childhood, and the version, or maybe some set of versions begin with the new modern era, and this is some traditional way, because the founder of the discipline, Philippe Arié, wrote his book exactly, started perhaps from the 15th century, I'm not sure, but, and period before French Revolution, and the big polemics which followed this book also discussed wars, the childhood in the Middle Age or not, and why we like to add medieval childhood into the history of childhood, etc. So I would like to say that perhaps we have to speak about different history. The first version starts with the Marian England and so on until the disappearance of childhood as neo-postmodernism. Yeah? And but for example, another we can see a lot of books and papers written not only about medieval childhood but also about childhood in ancient times, not only about Greek and Roman period. This year, in Deutschsprache, it was published very big volume about Mesopotamian childhood. Ulrike Bock published a book about how childish years of Mesopotamian Mesopotamian kings described in their inscriptions, their biographical inscriptions. Very huge book with German translations of. So we have history of childhood in ancient times. And third, not the last, maybe, and third version, for example, the series which is published, and as I don't know, is it continue now in the USA? The title is American Childhoods, and there are various volumes. Each volume is devoted to maybe 20 years or 30 years in American history, and we have another approaches about different childhoods for every generation. So maybe this is the third version. So it's my point of view, and this just small addition. This book written by Colin Hayward, to my mind, this is very nice approach not to speak only about particular history of childhood, but to show people, students, and postdoctoral about some ways, some questions, not methods. He didn't write about methods, but maybe some problems, to think about some questionnaires, and these questionnaires you could apply to all other sources, transforming, of course, a bit according to the epoch.
Difficult to start. I want first to mention what we want to know is dependent from what we want to do is dependent from what we want to know. If we want to know how childhood has been and what changed in childhood and what didn't change in childhood, I think the time space is too short, the last 200 or 300 years. Even if we took the first complex societies in Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt and China that are from 5,000 to 3,000 years ago, it is also too short, I think. Children are adapted to this world at least since 6 million years, not since 200 years. So if you want to understand a child fully, or at least to a higher extent, we must know which conditions formed the type of children we found all over the world. And that is the reason for my proposal, which is a little bit interdisciplinarily orientated. For theoretical order, we can divide in 3 levels. First could be the biological level, the second could be the developmental psychological level, and the third could be pedagogical level, and the fourth level even could be the school historical level. And these levels are in a hierarchy. The 3 or 4 dimensions are, as you know, in our daily lives, they are connected with each other. It's only for theoretical order necessary to divide them. But if I have time, a minute, I would show it with an example. The biological level shows us which physiological abilities occur in which age and which external cues are appropriate to stimulate these physiological processes. The child development is not autonomous. An example given, the deaf blind children by birth. You have a large delay even in the physical development, not only in the mental development, even in the physical development, because the 2 main senses, ear and eye, are dead. So I saw it with my own eyes, because these main senses are not present. A deaf blind girl from, let me say, 24 years looks like a girl of 14 years. Yeah? So you see, the other senses can compensate this deficit. Today we know that deaf blind, if we care for them in an appropriate way, they can even do dissertations in the meantime. In former times they are in psychiatric clinics. That's to the biological level. The second level, the developmental psychological level, is above this one. And in case of childhood, it shows us this level, which mental and emotional abilities occur in which age, and what is necessary to support these processes. History may show that it often was a deficit in handling children, because they didn't understand what the children, the adults didn't understand what are necessary in former times often. And the third level, the pedagogic of childhood, shows us to which culture, at what time, and with which methods and contents the children have to adapt. Let me say the Bronze Age here in Okrogla, the children at that time, what must they learn and what must they do to become a sufficient adult of their population here? Surely different from today. We don't know it, but we can reflect it indirectly. The archaeology, in the meantime, has very interesting methods, and Stephen Missen, I remember, he wrote a book about the mental processes in prehistoric times.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable, but it's really. So the needs in the pedagogic of childhood is dependent from a given culture. I think we agree to that. And yet now to the last level, the history of school. I think the Slovenian school history of at least the last 250 years has, I cannot read my own written sentences. In the time of compulsory school in Slovenia, I think 200 years or so, 250 years, I don't know exactly.
40.
Yeah? 240, yeah, thank you. And I think Slovenia is a very good example to compare the different influences from north, from south, from west, from east on the school system. Let me say the monarchy, the fascism, the communism, democracy, and if you want,
Different nations.
yes,
Netherlands, Germany.
that is Slovenia is for me like a railway station. From every direction, influences were taken here because of the very central position. So it will be probable, we heard a lot of different contributions, it will be probable to demonstrate different types of these, what I call moderating. Yeah? The culture moderates the needs of the children. They have to go to school or not to go to school. Yeah? They have to learn divided in sexes or not divided in sexes. They have to learn more music and religion or less music and religion. The culture makes it, not the children. Yeah? What is important, and as we saw on your book titles already, the culture also didn't know what is appropriate. It changes very massive in 60, 80 years. Yeah? So if you want, you can compare these different types of societies in Slovenia with, in order, the quality of didactics, the amount of money per child in comparison to the general welfare of the society at that time, or the contents of school lesson, or the relation between school contents and the needs of society. Often we have societies which need very different qualifications than which are given in the school or in the universities. For Argentina is a very good example. They produced a lot of philosophers and lawyers, but very little agriculture engineers. It has to do with the traditional opinion of the society. An educated person has no dirty hands. That is different in Middle Europe. Yeah? But this is also an influence. How fits the education system to the needs of the society? I think the happiness of the next generation is dependent of this. Yeah? And I think there are only four dimensions which you can compare in Slovenia. It is much easier, I think, than to compare it in a nation with much more members, maybe the States or maybe Russia. It is so. It is like in an experiment, I think. Yeah? And when you do that, in the result, one may be able to show which type of society did most for children. In my eyes, it is not clear that in our times we do most for children. It is only our own suggestion, I'm afraid. Yeah? If we compare the wealth of a nation with the input in school and on child care and young family care, I'm not convinced that in our times we spend most in the next generation. With this way you can find out this. And that's all. I only want at the end to mention a methodological article which I find very interesting. It is not done by a historian, but with this book, which I will mention now, he wins the Pulitzer Prize in the USA, so it is good work. And his name is Jared Diamond. And the title of the book is Guns, Germs, virus and germs, and Steel, a short history of mankind. Mankind history is very long, and the book has 1,000 pages. It is not so short, but in comparison to the mankind, it is short. And I can recommend the last chapter. The last chapter is a little bit provocation, but Diamond is an ecologist and a biologist. Therefore, it could be understood that it is a little provocation. The last chapter has the title. The chapter has maybe 20 pages. How history can become a science. He criticizes our science, and I think he is not wrong. There are possibilities to make the discipline history more scientific, and it depends on the methods we have in the meantime, but we must take this method in our subject also. So maybe you get some ideas in reading this article. Thank you.
Yeah, I just would like to add a few things to what you both said. I find it very interesting to say to look for the type of society that does most for children. And this, for example, what I'm interested is also in which society children have the highest value in society. And there, for example, it's ancient Egypt. That's very impressive because you had funeral rituals where it all depended on the child begging the gods for mercy for the parents. And this was the key whether they go well to heaven or to hell. So all depends that the child truly from the heart wants the best for their parents. And this is a very interesting thing to think what value children have and how it's important for parents to care for their children, because this decides about the eternity.
This is also the characteristic of the Catholic religion, actually, because they devoted a lot, big amounts of money for the child's welfare, in order to that this child will pray for the soul of the donator. And this is spreading with Christianity through the Europe, from the early Christianity.
Yes, there have also been influences of this Egyptian way of thinking and of Christian thinking. And what I also want to check is I find very interesting what you said about it. Yes, I try.
You can use this device and we can.
Okay, so that's all. Okay, thank you. That you said it's interesting of different childhoods as a plural. And I think it's also interesting to think in different histories, so of parallel ways of history, because it depends strongly on the language I'm using, my understanding of time, a bit of history. For example, if you take old Hebrew texts, they don't have the understanding of time as a line. It's not past, present, future. It's just, it's hard to translate, but they have complete and incomplete. One example is that God will save its folk is complete. Even we would say it will be in the future because it is a promise and God will keep that promise. And I think this is something that's important to reflect even more, especially the more intercultural exchange we do, that we remember that different languages mean different understanding of time and history. Something else. I think it's very important.
I wanted to say something from the part of history now. You mentioned the history of childhoods, and I just wanted to remind that there was a debate on whether we should talk of history of childhood or history of children. Mm-hmm. There was a very intense debate which brings the subject into the fore. And I would say childhoods mean not only different period or generation, but social class and gender, which I think came up in the papers, but there were not papers who concentrated on this subject, social class and gender. They came up certainly in the papers. And something else from the part of a historian, that, well, I don't know how far it is possible, but the idea then would be to be able to integrate history of childhood also to these historical accounts, the great historical accounts. For example, Eric Hobsbawm, who has recently died. They write the history of Europe, but they don't include children's history. It is the same problem with the gender historians. For example, the age of industrial revolution, but industrial workers were children to a very large extent. Of course, he may mention this in his account, but it is not, the history of childhood is not yet an integral part of a modern European history, or age as analytical category.
Different periods of life, actually.
Yes, periods of life in general. I don't know if it is possible to write. It is like interdisciplinarity, which is very important. It is difficult to do it, to write it. How do you write a history of Europe, including gender, integrating it? You may mention women's right to vote, but how do you include it in the account? And with the children, it is much more difficult, maybe because it's younger. Philippe Ariès wrote his book in the 1960s, but historians of childhood became really powerful, institutionally accepted, I think, in the 1980s, 90s.
Especially in Germany, a lot of German pedagogues didn't read him, they only know the title. And draw conclusions from the title. That is my hypothesis after reading Arias and after reading some
He's more
persons
subtle than the title implies.
Yeah.
His account is more subtle than his title.
He was a very exact historian. I admired his work, but not
his general.
a lot of the following literature is based on him. He can't help, he's dead. What I want to mention is, you mentioned interdisciplinarity, and it is very often critically seen how to do. I only want to show you that it is possible, and at work it is hindered by the historical order of our universities. We are ordered in faculties, not in topics. Mm-hmm. If we would have an institute for childhood, you would have biologists, developmental psychologists, historians, pedagogists, and they must come to an end together. For example, in space science, if you want to give a space shuttle, you need medicine, physics, sociology, different chemistry. They have to work together. You see the result, it works. So interdisciplinary can work if it is forced. And we have also, not only in Germany, I think in other places also, a few institutes which have an interdisciplinary approach. For example, in Leipzig is an institute called biological anthropology. And there are linguists, biologists, and psychologists working together. They must. I think it is a question of organization also. The methodological problems are solvable. And then I want to mention another resource. I'm sorry, but I must make a little bit propaganda. But I'm now retired, so I have no advantage of that. In the Klinkhardt Verlag in Germany, Klen Hart with D and T, the Klinkhardt Verlag produced a series about 22 volumes, which are always trying in an interdisciplinary approach to reflect a problem of history of education. For example, violence in education and family, from ancient Egypt up to recent cases in America, Columbine or Germany. Also, the history of the different types of writings, hieroglyphs and the Sumerians and Akkadian types. And if you read this, you can see it are always, I would say, ecological frames who produce a situation, and this situation produces a type of gathering information or storing information. So, on a timeline of 5,000 years ago, it is also reduced to this 5,000 years. Sometimes an archaeologist could say something, but mainly it is the last 5,000 years. But for school historians, some interesting aspects, I think.
But there is also the human agency, interacting with the human agency, interacting with the ecological framework.
That was my impression, yeah. For example, at the first complex societies in history of mankind are not ideas of some man or ladies, but consequences of a very gifted situation. A river, delta, the Nile, or Euphrates and Tigris with plenty of good earth, or the Huanghe in China, small areas where you can have 3 harvests in a year. That has the consequence rich people, that has the consequence of a dense population, and that has the consequence of job diversification. One is an accountant, one is a farmer, one is a soldier, one is an administrator. And in the moment when you have professional diversification, you have even a little bit money for scientists, like us today. So it has been the ecological frame who produced the cultural effects.
May I ask a question about the thing you've mentioned now? It's about the impact of childhood in a certain position, in a certain year, I don't know, era or something. So impact of childhood on the situation, political situation of the society, or the impact of society on the childhood, which is actually more important or more powerful. I don't know if you understand what I'm asking.
My personal opinion is that in our recent society, the impact of children on politics is too low. I'm not sure what are the reasons, but an idea would be to give parents with non-adult children a vote for their children at elections as long as the children are not adult. You understand? So our politicians, they are opportunistic. They must be opportunists all over the world, but we must calculate that they are opportunistic. And so we must get them to do more for children. It is our mistake, not theirs.
That is my question actually for the past,
Yeah.
to look at the history. So it's a sort of what was egg or chicken, the first came. But what is the impact more important? So when you want to study history of childhood, would you say, should we think first to see the situation of children in a certain moment, and what was the impact on the situation of society? Was the, I don't know...
in ancient Egypt, not different from ancient Mesopotamia or China or medieval times in Europe, the children are the, was heißt in Altersversorgung, the pension,
welfare,
the welfare for the parents. If the parents are ill, with no children, no chance. So there are very rational reasons to have children, and to have a lot of children, because some children die. Yeah. That is very different from our recent situation. Germany at the moment has the lowest children rate from the world. One child, eight children in 1,000 persons. We are first of the world in this.
In rural Germany in the 19th century, there was an organized care for the elderly on the part of their children. Rural Germany, unerben.
Unerben. Altenteil, yes.
In the farm,
So is your question answered?
Actually, now I formalize it in my head. Was it the consequences of someone's childhood as the consequences of the society after the 40 years? Or is that impact stronger than the society? You know what I mean, actually.
Okay, as I stated in my paper today, I think that these relations between the children and their parents are not limited to the period of the childhood of the children. They are long life relation, and we should look at the children from this perspective.
Yes, but I'm not asking child-parent, but society, political system and children. Which is impact more important in developing when you are researching in history? Because I think when you are raising the child, you are raising with some state of mind, and you are the product of the system, one on another sort of the system. So this is the impact of the past on the future. And I think that the childhood of someone or one population, one part of the population is very important for the structure of political system in 40 years. For example, we have here in Europe, we have that problem actually, I think. And is it possible that one political system made a big influence or impact on the way of thinking that we come to crisis after 40 years? Or, I mean, this is just an example or something. Or
I don't know, but I only want to mention in history times, without this complex structure we call state, with this complex administration for welfare and healthcare and so on, in history times, all this was devoted to the next generation or to the relatives. So, in former times, it was easy in daily life to understand that the next generation is necessary for your own existence. In our times, it is not so clear. Yeah? If you think about it, it is clear. No use, no future. But the data show that a lot of our companions have a different opinion. And I think the reason for this opinion is that the administration of the state delivers a lot of those Leistungen,
Security.
which in former times the family or the children did. So it is more abstract today to understand that childhood has an impact on each society, a big impact.
But if it is more abstract, it is also more general. It is a system.
That's very important, yes.
There
What
is
you
a-
do for your children has nothing to do with my old age. My children are spread around.
There is a book, a similar subject by Jürgen Schlumpong,
Yeah.
an old book, Wie Kinder zu, how the children become peasants, middle class, nobles. So, and I think the title itself speaks for it, that they grow up, for example, at the level of social class. But I mean, in a socialist system, there is a general influence, but maybe under this influence, there were, I wouldn't say social classes, but maybe social groups that raise their children in different ways, urban and rural. So I don't know if the crisis today in Europe has to do something with consumer society, urbanization.
Well, this was more like just a hypothetical thesis, it's about a state of mind.
Okay, the fear of society about not having the offspring, I think it's clearly stated in the Holy Bible. When the Herod kills all the children of age until 2 years old because he wants to kill the Christ. Male children. This was, I think, as some sort of the symbolism put into the Holy Bible to show the whole extent of the catastrophe. And it was this holiday of the innocent children was very important to the whole history of the Christianity. And I think there is some points which are not connected so much with the, one sort of the society, one sort of the culture, one sort of the religion. They are more, let's say, universal, anthropological. This is my opinion.
Thank you very much for your question, because you started a flood of opinions. So, the question is about the relationship between state policy, society and childhood, and how we would like to study this. To my mind, firstly, it would not be very clear to define what childhood we would like to investigate, because there are so many childhoods and so many opinions about childhood. And for example, the state policy would like sometimes not to care childhood, but to help people to avoid childhood, to become adults. And one hidden secret of pedagogical thinking is that educational theory sometimes is oriented not to childhood, but to avoiding, to help children to avoid, to leave their childhoods. I've read this in one pedagogical periodical issued in 1919, just at the beginning of the 20th century. So this is a quote: "The educational science is devoted to help children to go out from their childhoods." So, and the same for state policy. And I suppose the history of childhood brings the state not good idea after the 18th century, because the idea that the childhood is a valued phase in all human life, and we have to care it with all our means, resources, etc. And from this time became the thinking in political theory how we have to connect with so-called childhood and what is it. And we can investigate this, and of course there is state policy, and there is state itself, and there is society, and many relations between. And I could mention one example of the trying to investigate. There is a very famous book written by Glenn Elder, maybe you know, Children of Great Depression. It was published in 1977, and Glenn Elder tried to look through the biographies of persons who were children in the time of big depression in the USA, and what he tried to answer: could we say that these children had got another adult biographies than other generations? So this is only one example.
In my opinion, it is important to differentiate what political system and what rule do you study. Because as soon as there is a turn to democracies, the way of thinking in politics changes. Democracies has many advantages, but it has one big disadvantage, and this is thinking in legislative period times. And I think when a state turns into a democracy, it becomes normal that policy is focused on a very short-term problems that are actually at hand, where in other political systems where you have way much longer periods of rule of one party or one person, I think it's way more thinking on how there can be an impact on childhood in the future. So I think this is something you have to differentiate in the beginning, and you get from there to different impacts. There's a strong impact or a lower impact, and also the thinking in time, as I said, long-term periods.
I will say now, thank you. It's actually, what would be the guidance of researching? Guidelines?
The guidelines of research.
As you are already afraid of, my guideline would be to work interdisciplinarily, because otherwise history could not establish continuous lines of childhood. Childhood is always the same, but always different. But there's only the cultural impact on the childhood. The biological or psychological program is nearly always the same. And we only moderate it with our cultures. Sometimes to the advantage of the child, and other times to the disadvantage of the child. But I think if we don't take into account the basics, we are not able to judge whether the recent type of childhood or an ancient type of childhood fits to the needs of children, or less or more. So it is the maßstab. It's a measurement. Yeah, the measure. But it's only one proposal.
Yeah, I think that history has been making efforts, not always. I think history has been making efforts towards interdisciplinarity, especially in relation to pedagogics and social anthropology. I would say it at this level. And I think a challenge for the history of childhood or children or childhoods, apart from a historical point of view, to integrate it in great narratives. It is that because it is a hot political issue, we should keep a balance. It is all this debate on children's rights, so dealing with issues such as child work, child abuse, it is to find the balance between a scholarly approach and a political approach, not to overdo. For example, child work sounds very negative, but if you look into different societies, it has also many positive aspects.
Depends on the concept of work.
It is a hot political issue. It doesn't look like this, but it is if we think of the history of childhood. And I think this was made clear in many papers on youth organizations and how important it is for.
You know, in a lot of countries, we don't have apprenticeships. For example, in America is unknown. And a colleague of mine, she's a social anthropologist in Arizona, she worked on apprentices in Germany because she wants to find out how a special part of the youth, which is more likely to practical work, is better to educate than they do it in America. In several states you can study on a college. The Americans have the philosophy, keep the youth as long as possible in educational institutions, not in apprenticeships. But that doesn't fit for a part of the youth. Die scharren mit den Hufen wie die Pferde. Ne? Also, they want to do some practical things, especially the boys, but not only the boys. So she, as an ethnologist, asked herself, may there be other types of practical educating which fits more to the youth? You know? And that's the reason she looks in Middle Europe, in Italy, Germany, Austria. What are the advantages of the apprenticeships? And it may be it is a good way, because childhood or youth has, in a special age, special needs, as we know. So it is difficult for a boy, a healthy boy of 15 years, to sit all the day and listen. It is not natural. The last 5 million years it was untypical. So I think it's a good idea to reflect at what stage of the development of the youth, and in which sex, also sex dependent, we should do what, to optimize the education. Not only the professional education. I know it from students too, maybe you too, how the students like excursions. Yeah? I use that as a tactical method to get them to work more intensive, because they are very motivated afterwards. Yeah? So for me it is a sign that our university education is too much based on books and sitting. Yeah? That is what for elder men like me, but not for 20-year-old girls and boys.
Yeah, the question of the practical working is also the question concerning the population with disabilities.
Yes, yes. Also.
They want to reintegrate them into society through the work which is suitable to their needs. So we are coming back to the early modern period when the work has the highest value in the, let's say, process of the education and in the process of the gaining the, let's say, the minimal needs to survive.
Yeah.
So the problem is the value, not value of a child, but value of the
Yeah.
the future adult, which is becoming from this child.
Only a specific question. How do you think that the history of the treatment of defective or invalid children can contribute to the history of childhood? A little bit more specific question. In the past, through the periods of time. So the treatment of defective children, invalid children, children that will never grow up, and so on. Because they don't hold this
Ability to grow up.
ability to grow up and this
You can use them.
this potential, because the childhood is sometimes valued because it holds the potential for the future of the nation, of the race, of the society. So maybe we should look at the treatment of this.
We should.
I think it can be a really important contribution because it's a good way to get a glimpse of what was the anthropology of the time, what was really the impression, because you normally have this, what is the normal human being, and all that is different from, you learn something about the values of the time and something like that. So I think in any case, dealing with all cases of childhood, but also as well of adults, that were not considered as normal in a time, you can learn a lot from anthropology and society. So I think it's very valuable and fruitful.
I think it's a challenge with the sources, like you also said, because I remember there was a colleague in Austria and she was working on crippled children in rural populations, and it was a question because the data came from the population itself. So the peasant would say, my son is not very intelligent. And this could be written down, but what did this mean? It may have meant that he wanted his son to avoid military service or whatever.
Or the school compulsory.
Still, it is
Or
not so
he may have
important.
interpreted romantic behavior as...
So it would be better to say my son is very intelligent. Maybe it's risky for the army.
This question has importance in the mid of the 18th century, or let's say in Prussia already in the end of the 17th century, and it was connected with this compulsory military education of the young female of males.
So
And in
it's
this,
our fate to defend you. Yeah.
and this is the question which is coming to an end with this new organization of the army as a paid army. And this fears go into the second.
In Slovenia too.
In Slovenia too, according to the NATO.
There were many illegitimate children in Austria for various reasons during the 19th century in rural Austria, which were cheap labor force, etc. And it seems that they had many psychological problems. So it is a question for historians. Why? Because they lacked affection, not always, but many of them lacked affection during their early childhood.
You know that in
Because there are some regions where
in former times the political authorities didn't allow to marry. So that is one reason, not only protection of pregnancy is a reason for illegitimate, I don't like this word.
Yes, I know. Children born out of wedlock. Yes. But they are not according to the law.
Yeah.
I know the word is little, but it means that the law doesn't accept it. So from this point of view.
And you know, we have in German even today a useful phrase with Kind and Kegel. And that means Kegel are the illegitimate children, and they have a different term for them because the laws, such as Erbrecht, heritage laws were different for those types of children. Today not, but at that time, therefore there are two different concepts. And I think the quantity of illegitimate children are so high because the political authorities didn't allow to marry.
And they were cheap labor in Austria, at least. They were cheap labor force.
Yeah.
In rural regions.
In Austria was this marriage restriction. In Austria was so after the period of the Joseph II, the general marriage freedom was declared, but this person needs some sort of the permission to marry, and this permission was so expensive they didn't couldn't afford it. But in general, in legislation, it was marriage was open to all population, also for the the daily workers or people without for the servants for.
It's interesting that Philip Barrier came to study the history of childhood from study the history of family planning and history of contraceptive means. So this was his personal way to this. But you asked us about children out of wedlock or about handicapped children?
They said that children out of wedlock were handicapped. We find large numbers, and they attribute this to deficits in early childhood, to little affection, etc. So it's an open question.
It is an open question
for historians of the Alps.
Yeah.
Okay. Also for the area of the current Slovenian, because as I am expert for the history of the poverty. In the 18th century, there is very rare documentation about handicapped people in general.
So
sometimes
they were invisible for the society.
Actually, they were invisible. With appearing of this, let's say, public poor relief, they become visible. And then, in this period, they became supported from this public welfare state, and they became, as such, unuseful because they were the whole life supported from the poor relief system.
In what cases they became invisible?
In the poor relief system. But at the end of the 19th century, sometimes already before, with the development of the educational sciences, they became a part of the scientific approach to the different problems.
Yeah. There exists also a volume on dealing with handicap, but it's in German, interdisciplinary approach. Starting with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. In ancient Egypt, there are cases that dwarfs become very high-ranking position, like a minister. So the opinion of societies in the last 5,000 years changed often. It is not only an advantage of our present times that we have a very humanistic approach to disability, but it happens also to some time in history. Yeah. And in other times it declines again.
In ancient Greece, the blind, they had eyes, inside eyes.
Yeah, we see this sort of the people only on the, let's say, fine arts.
Yeah. There are some black African cultures which say it in the same way like the ancient Greece up to today. That the blind could not do bad things, so they have a special aura and no one will hurt them. So it's much easier to be a blind in, for example, Kenya, Tanzania, than in Middle Europe.
But maybe the miserable people are visible only in the historical sources, but in the connection with pilgrimage churches, and they are extremely visible. They are showing, because this show as a possibility for collecting money.
Yeah,
But I'd like to go back to the history of childhood. One part of this topic, well, I completely disagree. You know, the title of this teeny book is a history of childhood. Please open and read me one sentence about childhood in Slovenia. Not in general, maybe show me some details. Not only Slovenia, but maybe also the Balkan Peninsula, maybe, I don't know. If you try to make a general picture, then it's enough that you find the sources from Germany, France, and England, maybe some comment from Spain, and the picture is complete. You don't, nothing. This is complete. From this side, it's for me important not only this different level of the discovering of childhoods. This is very, very nice support of our thinking, but also this comparison of some regional experience.
We're coming also to the question of the family forms, to the Hanyal line and such questions.
There is no one book in Cyrillic, for example. No one book in Russian. No German. No in Spanish language. But it's okay. Maybe also our book with the same title maybe could be better. Some Slovenian use or something like this, and especially my comment to these books. Okay, I need some information about us.
I would think I would agree with you absolutely, and this is a bit of what I mentioned in the beginning, that you have to be very well aware that your language changes your thinking. And of course, if we just use sources from a special language, we take over this thinking of time and of childhood in this language, just by using the terms, if you like it or not. And I think this, when you asked about the guidelines, this is something I would add to the guidelines, and I would call this "be aware of black boxes." Mm-hmm. So remember always that you are never able to see the full picture, the full truth. So no one is the arbiter of truth in the end. And be aware that there is always, due to the perspective you are choosing, and of course language is a perspective you are choosing, that there are always aspects you will never take into account, because they're in your back perspective. And I think this is something that it's important, because I would absolutely agree with the guideline of interdisciplinarity, where different perspectives can help us to make our black boxes visible. So this is a little bit, of course, yeah, because even this will never succeed in getting the full picture. And even if we would do, society would change and would mean nothing. You know, we had a good documentation. So yeah, I absolutely see this as a problem, as a big problem. I would add that to the guideline.
Is to use the metaphor of a piece of the broken glass, which was made by one of the inventors. I would like to say that in interdisciplinary approach sometimes could mean that can we take two pieces from two different broken glasses and bring them together and try to find the border, and maybe sometimes to find that there is no border, so that they are from one glass. Because the programs of interdisciplinary approach is in what field we would like to stay, in history or in sociology and anthropology, in biology or maybe in ethology, etc. Or we would like to create a holistic approach and say that we can maybe investigate in handicapped children. We can take philosophy, sociology, history, biology, psychology, and compare different pieces from different glasses and try to say that we can't do it because the form of each glass is the same. So we have, speaking about interdisciplinary approach, we would like, we have to define where we would like to be. Reconstructing one glass, history or philosophy or biology, or try to maybe reconstruct the idea of many glasses.
I think it's basically a methodological problem. Because most of it, and I think we have to differentiate. There are two types of interdisciplinarity. One is, for example, I make a book and have an article of each discipline on a topic, and then in the end, each article says my discipline knows what's the best. This is, I think, I would not call that interdisciplinary. I think this is really, it's a bit the special thing to get to some sort of organic interdisciplinarity. I think this works when, as you mentioned it, you give topics, not disciplines, and then you try to think interdisciplinary from the start. And I think this only works with theoretical work, because theoretical work is, I think, the only method really accepted in every discipline, and it becomes more different with empirical methods. So how to bring them together, what value there is. So I think interdisciplinary work is possible. It's possible in an organic way, but basically the results will be theoretical models. And I think this can be the value to get.
May I add one sentence? I agree with you. And remember a sentence a colleague always said interdisciplinarity happens in the brain of a person, or it didn't happen. Between the envelope of a book, it is not interdisciplinary, it is an addition. That is the first step. It is not, I will not devaluate. It is nice to take different disciplines together to a topic, but interdisciplinary work is the next stage. And after the interdisciplinary work, there is another stage. Some epistemologists already speak about from transdisciplinarity. Yeah. We are far away from that, I think. But I think the time of disciplinarity is over. It's past. The easier you understand it, or the better it is for yourself and for your brain. It is a good training to look what the others do.
Perhaps want to add one sentence, because it's, I did not want to say that these books are not important, but I think it's a good metaphor to consider the text in these books as some sort of bricks, and from there we try to build a house, and in this house someone should live somewhere. And I think this is, from gathering these articles, different persons can learn how to theoretically put them together, and what are the commonalities, what are the parallel aspects.
Because they became familiar with the methodology of different disciplines, and there are these cross-cutting issues which could be seen from different perspectives. Perhaps, please, because I want to finish the whole run table, so if you have some final remarks, please add it to the debate.
I just want to mention about the importance of contextuality, not to see just the child and the society without the private house. this is the part of something. It's not a,
it was holistic.
yes, it's holistic on the one side, and on the other side, to see yourself. What are you thinking? What's in your brain? What's prejudice in your brain? How you see the childhood from your eyes, and that you are not objective. And I think this helps to come to some good result. Okay, I want just to say thank you, all of you. I hope that you enjoy the round table and our congress.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this conference because it's very, very interesting.